Okay, so I think we should be live. Just double checking. So just making sure that everything is working. Seems to be working. I mean, let me know in the chat if it's working, if you can hear me. I feel like I'm out of focus, at least on the video that I see on YouTube, so I'm not sure if that is actually the case, and it looks out of focus. Hey everyone, hi Rob. Just not sure. Anyway, welcome. It's been a while, I think, that we had this, this stream last time. So it's summertime, so people are not really here, are coming back slowly. It's August. I think a lot of people are still on vacation. So Rishamel, hi, hello, welcome. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I'm terrible with this. Okay, great. Well, happy to see you all here. As you can see, I put in the title for this stream as prioritizing the backlog and saying no to stakeholders, because this has kind of been the topic that I've been looking into and thinking about in the past couple of weeks for various reasons. So I thought that we can start off with this, and then if you have any questions, as always, I'm here to answer the questions. Okay, Nix, hello. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Yeah. So basically, if you haven't seen my latest upload for the Agile audit, or episode 3, where I talked with Julio, we have been talking kind of on the topic of the product owner, prioritization, and everything, and stuff like that. And as I am also working on finishing up the product owner guide, I also was kind of working on the same topic. So it came to really good, I think, point for me to think about it and to kind of talk about this topic, because I found it interesting. I think that is something that a lot of people, struggle with, a lot of teams struggle with, especially in bigger organizations where you have many stakeholders who might be um, who who might be coming in not really understanding what agile is and how to implement it, and being used to just asking on sending new requests and having stuff done. Hi, Jose. Hello from Mexico. Well, must be really nice there these days. Well, I kind of are still in summer here, but we can feel the fall coming. Yeah, so stakeholders. I think that's what I wanted to talk about. And one of the things that actually, as you maybe saw, we're discussing with Julio is about the product owner, right? So the product owner coming in and making changes to the sprint backlog, really giving everyone a lot of work, not really considering the capacity, right? And then one of the things that I think we covered there is, as I said, well, if you keep saying yes, right? If you keep adding new stuff, you're giving a lot of promises, right? And so people are happy when you're giving a lot of promises. They feel good. They're like, oh, great. All of these things are going to be done by this date, which is completely unrealistic. And they are happy for some time, all the way until the date when you don't deliver. And then they're really mad. So we're talking kind of about that, right? And it reminded me of someone I used to work with, actually. As one of the directors in our organization. And he was a very well regarded person by the executives and by the leadership team for one very specific reason, is that he would promise some crazy things, deadlines, and things that we would deliver that were absolutely unrealistic. And then the team would not be able to deliver. Well, that would come back to the team and say, well, the team wasn't doing their job. The heck, didn't you say that you will be able to deliver that? And he would say, well, I did everything I could, but the team. And so that was very frustrating, I think. And that's what came to me when I was thinking about that part of the guide and just kind of the conversation I had with Julio about saying no. Yeah. And a few things that kind of come to mind when, if you are facing the same situation, a few things I think I covered in one of the videos is to making sure that you actually set the right expectations, right? It's not about saying, hey, we're not going to do it, but it's more about saying, hey, maybe not right now. We will look into that, we will consider it, but right now we maybe have other priorities. And often just having that conversation can be very helpful. And one of the things that we did with one of the teams, we actually created like a support process. And I think I saw a comment actually on this, someone saying, hey, can you give me a bit more detail? And so basically, that can be helpful to some of you. So we had right customer requests coming in, and that was disrupt our sprint a lot. And what we did, we actually created like a process that allowed customers, people with like stakeholders, to be able to submit a request and have a follow-up on it. Right? So we have identified some SLAs of how much time we'll need to review something and then reply. But we immediately said, hey, don't expect us to work on it immediately. We have a sprint plan, right? We're working on something. Something most likely is more important, unless it's a production issue, right? And so we had a very structured process that would say, okay, if you want a new request, here's where you need to go, right? Here's the link. You need to click here. Here's the information you need to provide us. And we will reply to you within X amount of time, right? And so that was the process that we had to set up because previously we had zero process at all. And I'm actually working with someone right now. Hi, Rajishkar. Hello, scope creep. Yeah, well, I mean, scope creep pretty much, right? When just new requests are coming in. And the scope creep itself, right? It's fine. The problem is with the plan that originally was created, right? Obviously, we probably will find out more. We'll find out that there is more stuff that we need to complete as we start working on something. The what needs to happen though, it's say when we are adding new stuff into our product backlog, is that we have the conversation around, well, how does it change our original plan, right? So if we add more work, well, we either need to push the delivery date because we have added more work, or we need to remove something from our product backlog that is maybe less important, right? And so that would be that responding to change part that you're talking about in the comments there. Responding to change is one of the agile values, exactly. So that basically means is going back to our plan and we review the plan. Like that is the whole point of that value, actually. It's not just, hey, just take new work and do whatever. Right? We're responding to change, but we need to respond to it in a smart manner. We don't just change requirements because we wanted to change requirements. We would change requirements because we feel that it provides us with more opportunities to deliver value to our customers, right? So you have a question there. If it comes in the sprint, how can I do the refinement? Well, it's not coming into the sprint immediately, right? Say you have it will distract our sprint goal. Well, nothing that basically, if your sprint goal did not become obsolete, which honestly happens like in 1% of cases, realistically, if your sprint goal is still important, you still want to complete it this sprint, right? And the product owner feels that this is an important goal, then whatever that might distract you from the sprint goal and might divert your team and not allow your team to complete that sprint goal, this is less important by default, right? Like that's not coming into the sprint. Like that's, I guess, one of the rules where you say, yes, sure, we can definitely work on that, but we're not going to just drop everything we're doing right now and start working on that. We will review it, we will refine it. We probably, maybe, will take into the next sprint if the product owner thinks it's important. But we're not going to disrupt our current sprint, right? In the end, that is kind of the contract that we, like an agreement that we have with our stakeholders, where we say, look, we give you an opportunity to come in, give us feedback, give us new requests. We will refine them, we will review them, but what we ask from you is that you let us alone. Basically, you let us focus for one sprint. Because nothing is usually that important that it has to be done within one sprint when we're talking about software development, unless it's a production issue. We're not talking about production issues, right? But just new requests, right? Usually nothing is as important. And if something is, and it's coming in last minute into a sprint, I would turn back and say, why didn't we plan for it? We need to do a better job planning, because it shouldn't be just kind of a normal thing where just randomly add new stuff into our sprint. So yeah, basically that's kind of a no-no. So, okay, so let me see what you have there. Suppose I'm a 5th day of the sprint, how can accept scope creep? It will be very difficult from the developer perspective. The thing is that you still have limited amount of time within your sprint. If you're bringing something into the sprint, sorry, I just realized my camera is doing something weird. If you're bringing in something into the sprint, say you have figured out, oh, we actually need to do this thing in order to be able to accomplish our goal, we didn't realize it before. If you're bringing it into the sprint, you have to throw something away. Like, it's an exchange. It's not we just keep adding more stuff into the sprint. That just doesn't work. I mean, you can keep doing that, but you're not going to be able to accomplish it. So the rule is, if we're bringing something in, we need to remove something of the similar size. So the scope creep is really, it's a kind of scope exchange. It's kind of how you would approach it. So you set the rules, like if you're asking how can a scrum master handle the scope creep like that, well, you educate your stakeholders, you educate your product owner on the work, how we do work in sprint, and you set some rules in place. Yes, you can put something into the sprint, but you have to choose what are we not going to do that is already in the sprint. It's not like an optional. It's like that's how you do it, basically. Um, Hello, Junaid. Another question. I'm from Pakistan. Hello, hello. You're conducting such a great podcast. Oh, thank you for watching the podcast. Really appreciate your efforts. Please keep it up. We have a new episode coming up, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching the podcast. I'm glad to know that you enjoy it. Okay, more questions from Rajesh. You're not asking why that new feature. You're not checking how it will give more value. Well, you definitely should do that, right? Basically, any work that comes into the product backlog or, uh, well, product backlog should go through the product owner. And the product owner makes the decision on the order of work. So the product owner says, hey, I believe this brings more value. Great. I mean, you're the product owner, you have that knowledge, so you are the decision maker, right? So that's kind of where we go for in terms of how you're checking if it gives more value. Well, the product owner should do that, because in the end, the product owner will be held accountable for the value delivered, for like the customer satisfaction. So they will decide whether they believe it brings more value or not. Rishamel, oh, communication, like comply with you. What do you mean? Um, I want WhatsApp. I mean, it depends on what you want. If you want to have like a mentorship, I have like a mentorship program, or you can sign up for a single coaching session with me. I can put in the link, or Lisa, if you're on the call, if you can put in the link to the website for the Scrum Master mentorship. If you want to do a bit more of like one-on-one coaching, that's the best way to do it. I generally try to reply to comments and emails. If you're leaving, especially comments on YouTube, I think these are like the comments on YouTube are the ones that I generally reply to. Maybe a bit less on other platforms. Yeah, and because I do get made like a lot of emails from time to time, I don't really get a chance to reply to all of them. I may read all of them, but not actually reply to all of them. So information about the Scrum Master classes. Oh, so the classes, if you are looking for like the professional Scrum Master class, the PSM one, I really rarely do. I don't even think that I have a PSM one class before the end of the year. At least I didn't plan one for 2023. But you, okay, I'm just looking for the link to give you guys. I do have APS. So APS are the Applying Professional Scrum, which are the introductory classes, really kind of helping you get the understanding generally of Agile values, principles, what it means, and how it connects to Scrum. I usually do these ones, or I'm doing PSM 2. So these are kind of the classes that I'm focusing on. And and you can find like all of the information on my scrum.org profile if you're looking for like certification classes more specifically. So PSM2 or APS, and my schedule is there. I do have some classes in French, so like then my next PSM2 is in French, but my next PSM2 in English will be in December. I don't do as many classes right now. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, one of the things. I am doubling down on that for now. And the prices for those are pretty set. So for Canada, because I am in Canada, we have a set price of about $1,700 Canadian per person. And we also have like an early bird, which is 1,500, around that, Canadian per person. So that's the regular prices basically in our region. So let me see what else we have. Oh, Rajesh, you had a question. Are you doing a story estimate? You can. I mean, depends. If you are already doing story estimation, like as in estimating story points, you can do that. If you're bringing something into the sprint, you definitely need to have an understanding of that work. Well, you, as I mean, developers need to have understanding of that work to the point where they feel confident they can accomplish it within the sprint. That usually means that they can estimate it. And if you're doing estimation, you should estimate it. Rishamel, do you have a full package where at the end your students can land a job? I cannot guarantee anyone that you will land a job. Like, let's be very realistic and set the right expectations. I can give you all of the information you need. I can help you build all of the skills you need. I can make sure that you have the knowledge to be able to do the job. I cannot guarantee that you're gonna get the job, like, right? If we're working in a mentorship, I'll do everything I can to maximize your chances of getting a job. So we will work through the resume, we will work through the interviews, all of that. But in the end, it depends on the market and on you. Jay Sandy, is it uncommon for the product owner to also act as a scrum master, or do those roles inherently conflict with each other? Currently doing what that within my current role, and it seems to be working. Well, okay. I mean, in Scrum, let's kind of looking at the rules. In Scrum, we don't have the rule that says the product owner and the Scrum master cannot be the same person. It can be one person. They are kind of a little bit in conflict with each other. That's the whole point of these roles, that they are created in such a way so that people can have conversations where they will have different perspectives on things and are able to come up to the most optimal solution. So technically the two roles will be contradicting each other in small ways here or there. I think you can do it. It's just that it's going to be hard. Like, you will not be able to fully perform neither of the two. It means that you will be missing some of the opportunities and benefits of having Scrum, because you will need to like put on the hat of a Scrum Master. Okay, now I am a Scrum Master. I'm kind of thinking as a Scrum Master. Now I'm putting off my hat of a Scrum Master. I'm putting on my hat of a product owner. It's very difficult, I think, to balance the two. For example, I think that's especially, like, we can see that especially between the role of the product owner and a developer. If one person is doing both, like they're a developer on the team and also a product owner, it's very hard to disconnect from the technicalities of the work, and which makes it difficult to fulfill the product owner role, which is to make business decisions, right? So it's the same Scrum Master versus product owner. It may be difficult in some ways, but yeah, there are some things that can definitely be helpful as a product owner or as a Scrum Master. You need to work with the stakeholders, right? As a product owner, you are more kind of working with stakeholders to create visibility around the progress, the goals, all of that stuff. As a Scrum Master, you're more of an educator, helping stakeholders understand what their role is and all this agile thing. So it might be just difficult to kind of split them, but it's possible, and there is no rule against it, you know? So okay, what else do you have? If new requirement, sure, no worries, Jason. Okay, so Um, more from Rajesh Shekar. I'm sorry. If new requirement bring the product owner in the middle of the sprint, then are they doing any story estimate again? Are they doing refinement, that new requirement? How your team working on those? Yes, you have to do a refinement. Like it's not an optional. Like you have to refine the work, new work coming in. You have to refine that work to be sure that the developers understand it, they know what needs to be done, and all of that, right? And so if the product owner brings something in the middle of the sprint, remember that the sprint backlog is owned by the developers. So the product owner may bring something, but it's still a negotiation between the developers and the product owner to say, okay, does it make sense to take this in right now or not? Let's review that work. Let's estimate it. All of this, right? So yeah. Uh, so um, do any stories? Mm, yeah. If there is like, it feels like I'm just looking at the comments from Rajeshkar. If I have done refinement session very effective way, it still required sprint planning? Like, is it still required to be doing it in sprint planning? Suppose if we need sprint planning, I hope that is duplicate simple time consume. No, refinement and sprint planning have inherently different objectives. Refinement is looking at what you have in your product backlog and preparing the work ahead. Like usually you would want to refine enough work for the next maybe 2-3 sprints, right? So you go into details, but you don't go into details where like you are specifically like how to say, like you're not going into like nitty gritty of the tasks and decomposition. What you discuss in a refinement, you just want to make sure that everybody on the team, the developers who will be doing the work, have a very good understanding of what needs to be done. Now sprint planning is when you're planning for the sprint, and this is where you go in much more detail on the work that needs to be done. It's what you're going to deliver. So you have the sprint goal, then you select the items from the product backlog that I recommend are already refined and estimated. But then you discuss how you're going to achieve that work. So the sprint planning, you're planning for the next sprint. Refinement is just refining the product backlog. You're not actually planning for the sprint. So the two discussions have completely different objectives. So if you have done refinement very effectively, then your sprint planning just will be shorter. That's pretty much it. K Nix is asking, hey, can you explain the role of a Kanban lead? I'm not sure like, how it is organized in your company, because it can be many different things. A Kanban lead in a specific framework, in just an organization, because as you know, right, Kanban and Scrum are two different frameworks. You can implement Kanban within a sprint to kind of combine the benefits of the both frameworks. If a Kanban lead, a person, I would assume Kanban lead is someone who is kind of doing a similar thing what a Scrum Master does, but in relation to Kanban more specifically, right? So they would coach the team, help everyone understand, help optimize the processes, organize the work. So that's kind of what I would assume that role is. But yeah. Hi, Bucky Kemi. Can you explain the role of a business analyst in the CDLC? Well, what's the role of the business analyst? Let's think about that. It's to understand the needs and wants of the customers and stakeholders, right? Usually the role is really about collecting the requirements and transforming them into like work items. Business analyst, I'd say, if we are looking, say you have a scrum team, you have a product owner. So the product owner is the person accountable for the final value delivered. The business analyst, we can often say that the business analyst is kind of like a developer within a team who is more specifically helping the product owner with the requirements. So that kind of is more about understanding customer needs and making it clear for the developers who will be doing the work, well, as in the actual development, product development, and what needs to be done, why it is important, and all of that stuff. So I'd say it's more about that, and also answering questions probably that might come up during the sprint or at any point really about the work that needs to be done. So Rajesh Shikar, how you maintain product backlog health? In my company, I maintain my two times of my average velocity. I mean, yeah, about two sprints worth of work in the product backlog that is well understood and estimated. That's good enough. I would say maybe try to plan for a little bit longer, not too long. Like you're not trying to plan for like a whole quarter or something, but just for maybe an extra sprint, you know? So and then everything else, right? It doesn't mean that you have like looked at the top priority for the next couple of sprints, 2 3 sprints, and that's it. You still have other work to do, right? You still need to have an idea, okay, well, after that, what are our kind of next big goal? What is the roadmap? Like what will be the big items that we would want to work on next? And so to have generally an idea of what comes next, even if you don't go into details on each one of those items, like you need to have a clear product goal. Product goal probably will span longer than just 2 or 3 sprints. So yeah, about that, like you don't want to go too much into details, but you still need to have like an understanding generally of what would be like the big things, right? Maybe you haven't started to decompose it. Maybe it's still like epics, like big things. You didn't start to like look into the details of those work items, but you at least have an idea of what those items are. Sure, Kenix Olu is asking, can you explain the difference between cycle time and lead time? Yeah, so cycle time, it's basically from the point the task has been started until the point it has been completed, right? So um, the task that is like still sitting in to do, we haven't started the cycle time. So the cycle time is really the time it takes to complete a task or a story, whatever that is. So from the point it started, we started working on it until the point we completed, it's fully done. Lead time, it's about it starts at the point where the request has been made. So say a customer made a request into our system to fix whatever. So this is when we start to count the lead time, and then we end it when the customer received the completed work. So here's when I made the request, here's when my request has been fulfilled. This is the lead time. And the cycle time is like a small part within it. Okay. So Rajeshikar more about refinement. I'm doing refinement twice in a 2-week sprint to maintain my product backlog health. If I'm doing estimate there, is it required to do it again in sprint planning? If you have an estimate, usually you don't need to re-estimate. Like maybe if there was new information that has been discovered in the meantime, then you can re-estimate. But well, sometimes the other reason why maybe you want to re-estimate is, say, because in sprint planning you're kind of drilling more into the details, and say the team starts to discuss, okay, what needs to be done. Maybe they go into the details of how to test it, and they realize that their original estimate is maybe not as representative of the work. Like they found out a bit more information about what needs to be done, and that is why they might want to re-estimate. Like for example, we just had a sprint planning with one of the teams, and we already estimated all of the work, right? We kind of knew what we wanted to take into the sprint. But once we started to drill down into one of the user stories, we started discussing, and what we realized is that we actually kind of underestimated it, right? And what we did during the sprint planning, we actually split that work and we split it out. So original user story was like 13 story points, right? But then once we started to drill down, we realized, no, wait, there are two parts to this. One is 13 story points, but there's the second part that is going to be at least 5 or 8, right? Another part. So we split out that work. Originally, we thought it's going to be a smaller work item, but as we started discussing it, we realized that it is much bigger. So we needed to re-estimate. Who's accountable for the product backlog refinement meeting? Well, product owner is accountable for the product backlog's transparency. So product owner is accountable for making sure that everybody understands what's in the product backlog. So I'd say refinement is more on the product owner, kind of like having a refined product backlog is the accountability of the product owner. But also, there is another part of that. As developers on the team, developers are accountable for understanding the product backlog, right? So if developers are also not doing their part, they're still accountable for that. Like, yes, you're not the owner of the product backlog, but you still need to make sure you understand the work. And if you have questions, you ask them, right? And you ask them in advance, so that you don't come to sprint planning and everybody's like, okay, let's open the product backlog. I've never seen these items before, right? So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, right? So, but yeah, more of the product owner, I guess, just because they have that accountability for the product backlog being understood by everyone. A follow-up question from Olu. Is there a way in Jira to keep track of cycle time? Lead time sounds like that the product owner keeps track of. Yeah, I think the lead time is more of something that the product owner would be more interested in. In terms of the cycle time, yeah, you definitely can do that in Jira. They do have a cycle time report. So let me do cycle time report. It's just, it can be a bit complicated to kind of understand, but there is a cycle time report. It looks something like this. Wait, can I share my screen? Yeah, okay. Okay, you can even see me. So that is the cycle time report. It's called control chart. I talk a little bit about that in one of my videos on Jira reports. So that is basically what it shows, right? The red one is like the average, which is really averaged out over the whole period of time. So rolling average is usually just something that takes the recent, well, in this case, 5 issues, right? So it took the most recent 5 issues and it calculated that, well, on October 6th, our cycle time was about like 4 days, right? But as we progressed, our rolling cycle time went up because probably there were issues that took much longer, right? And we can see how those green dots are kind of going up. And so that basically is affecting the rolling average. And the blue part here kind of shows like the deviation, like the cycle time usually finds itself like most of the time within this line. So we can say that around November 17th, right? Our cycle time generally for issues is somewhere around like 5-ish days and like 17 days. So that's like the where most of the issues would find themselves in, right? And so usually you might have something like that. So control chart is the one you would want to look into. Okay, so more questions. Why we cannot add as event for product backlog refinement? We're saying ongoing activity. Well, backlog refinement, there you can have a meeting every week. It's just that basically Scrum doesn't tell us how to do it. It just tells us, you need to make sure your product backlog is refined. How to do that, that's up to you. If you want to meet every week for an hour, great, do that. Do we have any metrics for product backlog refinement or health? How do we measure the product backlog's health? I don't think there are any metrics, but what are you trying to solve? Do you have a problem with your product backlog? Like if your team has enough work that is planned for in the product backlog, generally you have a way like you're able to plan ahead a little bit. Obviously, we cannot guarantee exactly, but you have an ability to plan for maybe a couple of sprints. Then why do you need to track any additional metrics on the product backlog? Like I'm not sure what you're trying to solve. Like what is the problem you're trying to solve that with that any of those metrics? Ah, my manager is asking what is product backlog health report. Okay. So why is your manager asking that? Go back to your manager and figure out, okay, what exactly you're trying to figure out. Are you trying to figure out whether we have enough work? Whether like what's the point of this report? Like basically go back to your manager and understand why do you need that? What are you trying to achieve? What is your concern that you're trying to solve by having this report? Because the product backlog health report doesn't mean anything. I mean, ask the manager what exactly is the metric that he's looking for. But if not, you can say, well, we looking at our product backlog, we have enough of work for the next couple of sprints. Product backlog health, good. That's pretty much it. Cycle time is a better metric than velocity. It's just a different metric. So a question from Olo, whether cycle time is better metric than velocity. They just kind of have different objectives, I'd say. you know so you can use them differently. Like, say you can collect velocity, and velocity can help you figure out how much work to take into the sprint, right? So your average velocity is 20 story points. So when you're planning for the sprint, you can say, well, we usually are able to complete 20 story points, so we're trying to take about the same size, the same amount of work. Cycle time, here's what you can use it as. You can look into your average cycle time and see if there are any opportunities for improvement. For example, you can see, say your your sprint is 2 weeks, right? And you look at your cycle time, and your cycle time is 7 working days. Well, 2 week sprints, we have 10 working days. If your average cycle time is 7 working days, that's pretty big. Like it means that on average, it takes your team almost the whole sprint to complete a task, which opens up a lot of risks for the team to not being able to complete. Maybe you want to split your work a little bit more, like in smaller pieces, so that the team is able to complete smaller pieces of work every few days, right? So that increases your chances of completing or achieving your sprint goal, basically, right? And reducing the risk of not delivering. So you just use them differently. They're not really one is better than the other. I think it depends on what you're trying to solve. If there like, if there are any specific that you're trying to like a problem you're trying to solve, and then based on the problem you're trying to solve, you may want to use different metrics, right? Like for example, say your team has a tendency of not completing the work, even though they take kind of enough work based on their velocity. You may want to use cycle time to help you understand why is that happening. Okay? It means they maintain next 2 weeks efficient story point. No, I mean, Rajeshkar, what I mean is that you have enough work well refined and kind of ready to go for the next 2 to 3 sprints. So in your product backlog, you have enough of the work that is well defined and is estimated if you're using estimation, that has the developers know exactly what needs to be done for the next 2 to 3 sprints, not weeks, sprints. So somewhere around that, but it's not a rule, it's just a recommendation. Right? It's just a good practice to have. So yeah. So what is the input of the product backlog defined? What is it? The output, the product backlog. I mean, the input is the product backlog and the output is refined product backlog. Becky has a question. How do you measure your product backlog health? Wait, you're just asking the same question. We just talked about it. So yeah, that's kind of the same. If you have, if your team is able to plan ahead, if you're have enough work for the next few sprints in your product backlog, if you have a product goal, then that's a good product backlog. So yeah, I'd say maybe if you look at things like, say, how many changes are happening in the product backlog. For example, if your product backlog is constantly being changed on a daily basis with some new unexpected stuff, it might be, it's not the problem with the product backlog, but it's a problem with planning and communication between like the team and the stakeholders. So that are some of the things that you can look into. You not answered my question? I did answer your question. Which one? You asked me like 20 questions so far. I have answered all of them. So I'm not sure which one you meant. Yeah. Okay. While I'm waiting for some of the more questions, feel free to add some more questions. But overall, what did I want to say? I'm just looking at. We still have some time. Still have solid 10 minutes to answer any of the questions. And what I wanted just to remind everyone that the the product owner guide is almost ready. Like we're finishing, like the finishing touches on it. So we'll have a huge guide. We're gonna have like 150 pages of information. So if you are interested, I put in, I tagged it, I'll pin it to the chat. But yeah, just if you wanted some more information on how to help your product owner or how to be a product owner, what are some of the tools and practices that you can use, a new big update is coming up. Okay, are you doing refinement of a bug? Sure. You you should understand what the problem is, right? So before you start working, you probably will need to do some of that discussion, like understanding what the bug is, what are the potential problems. Many teams do not estimate bugs. So that's up to you to decide whether you want to estimate bugs or not. I'm working with teams who don't estimate bugs, and instead we just kind of count how many bugs we're able to uh, fix within a sprint in addition to our velocity. But yeah, you still need to have an understanding of it. GM, I am a new Scrum Master. You have helped me a lot with your tools. My teams have dependencies from the IT that is in waterfall mode. Can you help? How can I help them? Well, thank you for using my tools. I really appreciate that. And I'm happy to hear that they were helpful on your journey. So you have dependencies on an IT, I guess, department or team that is still in the waterfall mode. What can you do? Obviously, that's not a lot of information to go off, but start with trying to understand how they work, right? I think they are in the waterfall mode, but they still should have some kind of processes and documentation. They should have some expectations. Like, for example, we used to work with like an auditing department, a team, and they needed us to send them requests at least 2 weeks before we would want that request to be considered. So when we understood how they work, we were able to plan for it. So that is one of the things that you can do, is trying to understand their process and find like workarounds for that. So trying to find workarounds for that work, because probably you will not be able to really immediately make changes to how that IT department works. But there are some things that you can definitely help with, like just more for that planning and communication, creating relationships between the two, making the dependencies clear, like visible, so that everybody is aware of where are the dependencies. And also when you're planning for the work and say you have an item that you need to work on, but you know that it is dependent on this other department, and based on the history of you working with them, you know that it's not going to be done this sprint. Don't take that item into your sprint if you know it will still be blocked by the end of it, right? Plan for unblocking it before you actually take on the work. And of course, do some training. Maybe there are some things that they would want to implement to save themselves some time. Maybe they will not go full agile or implement Scrum or anything, but what are some of the things that you can help them implement that will make their lives easier? That's pretty much kind of the things that you can help with. Okay, Rajashikar, are you doing prioritizing the backlog before refinement or in the refinement session only? So refinement, and that's I think the question. Refinement is not a meeting, technically. You can have it as a regular meeting, but refinement is an ongoing activity. So the product backlog is a living artifact, right? The product owner owns the product backlog. So generally, I would assume the product owner spends a lot of time in the product backlog, making sure that it's well ordered and as much information as possible, or as much as the product owner has, how that information is included, right? So, but there is no rule. Like, I feel like you're trying to have a very specific step-by-step guide for how to do that. There is none. You know, you can do the prioritization or ordering of the backlog in the refinement. You can do it outside of the refinement, whatever works best for you. That's it for your team and for your product backlog, for your product owner. Okay. Olu is asking, on my current team, I guess, we have used the working agreement you created and it worked very well. Oh, great. In your experience, how long does it take to complete one pointer? I have told my team that one pointer is 1 day. Okay, so great that you used the working agreements. Happy that it was helpful. So in terms of the points, have you seen my velocity video? I have a video that's called, I think it's called That's Not How You Measure Velocity, or it's called Velocity is a Made Up Number. Not sure which one. But yeah, I have a video on velocity where I explain all of that. But one very important point is that one story point does not equal any amount of time. That is the whole point of using story points, is not to equate it to days, hours, or weeks, or whatever that is. That's the whole, because once you start to equate it, just estimate in days. Why are you using story points? You know, that, like, you basically kind of destroyed the whole point of story points by saying 1 point means 1 day, you know. So the story points basically is a relative estimation. Like, story points are made up numbers. They on themselves, on its own, story points don't mean anything. Story points only are relevant within a context of a specific team that uses that estimation. So one team may estimate a story as a 5. Another team might estimate exactly the same story as a 13, just because of how they use story points. It's different. It doesn't mean that the second team is just slower. It just means that the way they use story points is different, because story point on itself is a made up number. Why are we disconnecting it from the time? Because that was the whole point of having story points, is to disconnect it from the time. Why don't we want to estimate in time? Well, because when we work with complex products or complex work, trying to estimate in time basically by default is incorrect. You know, how long will it take you to complete this, like to fix this bug? I don't know what the problem is. I need to research it first. And so what people do, just in case, they add, like, slap a super buffer on top of it, and they say, oh, it's going to take me like 2 weeks, right? Just in case they add it. But that estimation doesn't mean anything, right? Because in the end, you can't really plan for it, because the person doesn't really know how much time it's going to take. So when we estimate with story points, we're estimating the complexity of the work. We estimate the effort required, risk included, like associated with that, and uncertainty. So say you have a work item that is very heavy on effort. I actually have added this example in the product owner guide, so let me actually find it, what it was. I was explaining, one of the things that I explain in the product owner guide is that part on the estimation. That's in addition to the relative estimation workshop that is included in the guide. But let me find that example. Okay, so the example I had there is about cooking at dinner. And so we decided to cook a lasagna and a baiser meringue. So, like, the ones that are made out of the egg whites, like for dessert. Lasagna is a pretty straightforward dish. You just need to follow the steps. The problem with lasagna is it's very heavy on effort. Like, you need to do a lot of steps manually. You cannot just, like, do one thing for 10 minutes and then let it do whatever. Like, put it in the oven and it's gonna cook. It is a labor intensive dish, so you need to spend a lot of time preparing everything. Like, you need to be standing in front of the stove for like an hour and a half, and you can't just leave. So this one, we can say, well, lasagna is 8 story points. Just, we just put a number on it. But when we're doing a dessert, which is baiser mirang, that's very easy on the labor. Like, right, you only need like two ingredients, egg whites and sugar, and you can whip it with a machine automatically, and then you put it in the oven, and then you leave it in the oven for an hour and a half. Seems easy, but it's very, very easy to also mess up this recipe. Like, it's very complicated to make sure that the consistency is exactly the one that you need, that your oven is heating exactly at the uh, amount of degrees that it needs to. So, while in terms of labor, this dessert is much less than lasagna, but because it's extremely complex and there is a lot of risk associated with messing it up, we can also estimate it at 8 story points. So it's not about the time, it's really about all of these are the things like complexity and risk and uncertainty. Like, I've never done like dessert like that, but I've done tons of lasagnas, so it's easier for me to do a lasagna than the dessert, right? So those are some things that you would include in your estimation. And days, hours, this doesn't matter. Why are you doing tasks in hours? I'm not doing tasks in hours. No, 1 story point is not equal any hours or days or anything. 1 story point means 1 story point. That's it. Like, forget that story points are related to time. Yeah, and definitely go watch my video. I go into a lot of details on that. The velocity is a made up number. Let me find the video. I'll try to find it. But yeah. And I also have lots of guides, that talk about it. So if you guys want to learn more, let me find that. Oh, yeah, that's the video. Yeah, so that's kind of the things. We talked a lot about the refinement today, product backlog, and how to manage scope creep. Talked a little bit about estimation. I Really good question about the working with a team that is working in a different way, like in waterfall mode, and how to kind of work with them. Few things there. Oh, by the way, I don't know, for some of you who are maybe closer here in North America, if you haven't seen, I will be like Scrum Master, will be participating the Scrum Day in Madison on September 14th. So that's a 1 day kind of conference. We'll be there as one of the exhibitors. We'll be bringing in some goodies there. We'll have a giveaway, and obviously I'll be there to answer any questions. So if you want to, or if you can participate, come on over. You can like get the tickets on scrumday.org. I'm not receiving anything from those tickets, just letting you know. Why I'm promoting it is because I will be there. So if you can come, it'll be great. Be happy to chat with you. Okay, one more question. Let me answer this one, and I think I'm gonna skedaddle to lunch. So why are we doing capacity or work effort if we're not doing any tasks, any estimation in hours? How are those related? Usually we're doing tasks for 4 hours. The capacity is always the same. Like, I think that's what people don't understand. What are you trying to, the capacity of the team, unless you have holidays or someone is on vacation, the capacity of the team in every sprint is the same. So if you have 10 working days, that's your capacity. You have 10 working days. Velocity allows you to just look into how much work usually we're able to complete within the 10 working days as a team. But if you're doing in hours, and it's working for you, great. Um, we don't do that. Like I've never worked with a single team where we would use our estimations, because that usually takes a lot of time to do hourly estimations, and in any case they're not accurate at the end. So yeah, that's kind of a waste of time. Really, if you're going to that amount of detail, you're spending more time on planning rather than actually doing the work. And that's why we use story points, because they're super easy to use, very easy to estimate. They don't take a lot of time. So, yeah. And yeah, if you basically want to learn more, I have some of that info on my blog on estimation and velocity. And I also have a guide that is the relative estimation guide, which is like a guide for a workshop, but obviously I explain the concepts in there too. So that's where you can learn a bit more about this topic. But yeah, so this will be it, I think. Yeah, so I think I'll be wrapping it up. As always, keep watching. Well, stay tuned for the next week's video. We'll have a big one. Very excited about the video that is coming up next week. Hopefully we'll have time to fully finish it, because it's a big one. I have some, like, a real treat for you, I think. A really great video. And then we'll have the podcast coming up next. And obviously, we will be reviewing the stream and cutting it out into shorts for those of you maybe who weren't there for the whole thing or couldn't join maybe the whole, all of the answers that I gave. But yeah, greetings from Greece. Oh, hello, hello. Thank you for the questions. So this video will be uploaded to YouTube as is, so the long one, but we will also be cutting the video into shorts. So some of the questions will be also posted as short clips, obviously 1 minute. We have to cut a lot of that, but we usually just upload the full video as is. I think that's basically through YouTube automatically. We have Angel, who is a new in Scrum and is looking for your first job. I'd always ask for experience and advice for newbies. I have a lot of videos on that. I have created a playlist on my channel that is called Becoming a Scrum Master. So check this out. You can go on my channel and it should be like on the main page in some of the playlists in there in the list. And yeah, so I do not have a WhatsApp group because I would not be able to manage the questions coming through that. That's why I'm jumping on these streams. And yeah, leave any comments with questions on this video or any other video, and I'll try to reply as much as I can. Thanks for joining. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next stream, or I'll see you in the next video, virtually, of course. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. And I'm gonna stop recording. And yeah, thank you a lot.